All right. It says we are live, guys. Welcome everybody. It is Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern time once again, which means, of course, it's time for me to go live and spend some time hanging out with you guys. Today, you will clearly notice that something about my location is a little bit different than anywhere I have been before. So there is a story behind why I am currently streaming today from my phone in my car in the parking lot of a Days Inn hotel somewhere in Southern Virginia. So anybody who follows the channel here and my sort of schedule of live shows knows that today we were supposed to be doing a live show from my home studio about different ways to move your camera and camera movement tools. Well, this week on Monday, this past Monday, I drove down to Raleigh, North Carolina, because I had two projects that I was shooting this week down there. One was on Tuesday, which went off without a hitch. It was great. But the second one was scheduled to take place on Thursday. Now, I don't know if anybody lives in the North Carolina area or is just keeping track of the weather on the East Coast middle of this week, but Raleigh got about 10 inches of snow on Wednesday, and everything shut down. So as a consequence of that, we had to shift the shoot from Thursday back to Friday. And so that meant I had to extend my stay at my hotel there an extra day, which means I am now currently driving home, which means I could not make it to my studio in time to give you guys the regularly scheduled show. But I didn't want to cancel it. I didn't want to have a week where I skipped the show. So I have been driving for roughly an hour or so. I'm back in Virginia now, just barely in. But I have pulled over to the side of the road to hang out with you guys for a little bit before I complete the rest of my 3-hour journey to get back to DC. And so I figured we'd do a little bit of Q&A today. So hey, Trevor, good to see you in there. Actually, that brings up what I want to talk about. So I am, of course, live, and so in order to do Q&A, if you guys have any questions for me about filmmaking or about just anything in general, I'm going to field those questions here for a little bit today. I'll be that creepy guy sitting in his car talking to his phone in the middle of a Days Inn parking lot. But if you have any questions, go ahead and submit them in the live chat, and I'll go ahead and answer them for you guys. And so, yeah, we haven't done a Q&A video, or at least a dedicated Q&A video, in a little over a month, as I recall. And so I figured this would be as good a time as any, and we will shift the scheduled show, the camera movement tool show, to next Saturday, when I will be back at home and I will be in my studio and I can do that show properly. So yeah, I saw a comment pop up that said, that's commitment. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's DL. Hey, how you doing, DL? Good to see you. Yeah, man, I didn't want to skip the show, and I also didn't want to, I got out of my hotel in Raleigh at about noon today, and of course, as you know, it's about 1 p.m. Eastern time, and I didn't want to waste an hour just sitting in Raleigh waiting for 1 o'clock to roll around. So I hopped in my car, I hit the road, drove for an hour, and then pulled over here, sort of in the middle of nowhere, but I am back in Virginia. And I want to spend a little bit of time hanging out with you guys. We might not do the full hour like we usually do, because I have been gone for a week and I really want to get home. So yeah, we're going to do that. So Trevor says, is this just an LTE broadcast from your phone? So yes, it is. I have my phone set up here on my little, my dashboard mount. This is where I usually set it up when I'm just using my navigation while driving. And yeah, surprisingly, for the middle of nowhere, it seems like my LTE signal is pretty good, which is awesome. So yeah, we're just streaming live from the phone. So no fancy switching and popping the chat up on the screen like I usually do each week, but I can see your chat comments come through, guys. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free to pop them in there. But in the meantime, I'll tell you guys just a little bit about what I was doing down in North Carolina. I don't know if any of you follow me on Instagram. If you don't, you should do that. It's at Bart Johnson Prod, P-R-O-D. But I was doing two projects for the company that I work for. Both were based well, they were about basically physics. So the first shoot was at the Department of Physics at NC State, which was really cool. That was the one on Tuesday. So I spent the whole day with them, going and getting an overview of the department, shooting some interviews and stuff like that, and got to see some really cool stuff. And then the one that was supposed to be on Thursday but got delayed until yesterday was at Duke University, and it's for the Triangle University's nuclear laboratory. And so that was really cool. I got to go into a nuclear reactor. I got to do some filming in a particle accelerator and get to go and see all this really cool stuff. I sent my wife some pictures and made her nervous because there were like radioactive signs all over the place, and I had to wear a dosimeter to make sure that, you know, I wasn't getting any heavy doses of radiation and stuff. But it was cool. They were really fun shoots. I traveled with my usual travel go-to kit now, which is basically my Panasonic GH5. I love that camera for travel. You know, it's so much smaller than my other cameras. The quality is fantastic, and I'm able to just move so quickly. You know, had a simple little audio rig with the XLR1 adapter, you know, tripod, and my Zhiyun Crane version 2 gimbal that allowed me to get B-roll shots really, really quickly. So I'll be editing those projects over the next week and a half so that we can get them done in time for the physics conference that they're going to be premiered at. But that's what I was down here doing, was work, and yeah, I'm really ready to go home because while travel is fantastic, I have been gone since Monday. I stayed a day longer than I was expecting to, and so that threw off my schedule a little bit. I have a full shoot happening tomorrow that I was expecting to have today to sort of relax, recharge, and prepare for, but that's not going to happen. I got about 3 more hours to go until I get home, but I'll be fine. I'll get everything wrapped up and put together. But yeah, so I'm here for you guys for, you know, a while here, hanging out in my car, and answering any questions that you guys may have about anything. So camera gear, lighting, how I travel with camera and lighting and all that kind of stuff, or just absolutely anything that you guys want to talk about. I know that one of the big things that did actually end up being real, that was a huge rumor mill thing, was the GH5S. I will say that being a GH5 owner, I don't think I'm going to pick up the GH5S. I'm definitely not going to get rid of my GH5 in favor of the S. That IBIS stabilization really is fantastic for the way that I've been sort of run and gun shooting lately. And I'm always a guy who lights stuff. I don't find myself in low light environments very often, and if I do, I always have a lighting kit with me, so I really don't have any issues with, you know, having to go super low light on the GH5, which, you know, the GH5S is sort of built for. You know, the theory is that that S is for sensitivity. And so I don't see any need for me to upgrade to it personally. So I know nobody asked, but I'll just throw that out there, that's, you know, it's an interesting camera. I think it definitely has its place as a specialty kind of camera. But I'm going to stick with my, my good old original GH5 because she has been treating me very well lately. So what about you guys? What do you think about the GH5S, or what do you think about just anything else in general? If you have anything pop into your head and any questions for me, please go ahead and pop them in the chat. Let's see if we got some stuff coming in here. So let's see. Trevor says, do the tools you use for narrative lighting translate to commercial, or are they really different? And is commercial more difficult? Okay, that's a good question. So narrative lighting versus like commercial work lighting. So I would say that they're different. I tend to find that when I'm doing narrative projects, I need more lighting in terms of more actual fixtures. And I tend to go towards more powerful lighting. And the reason for that is that generally my shots end up being wider, and we're lighting an entire scene or an entire environment, and we want to make sure that we can cover everything. And so you've got, you know, whether they be LED panels, usually you got bigger, more powerful panels, Kino flows and stuff like that. A lot more accent lighting, you know, like hitting little aspects that you want to highlight, and some more powerful stuff like, you know, maybe the Aperture 300D or some HMIs, like you know, joker bugs and stuff like that. But for interview lighting, I travel much smaller. And interview is sort of more the corporate commercial stuff that I do, which is like what I did on this trip. And for those, I usually get away with just 2 sort of LED panels. So I have 2 Aperture LS1C, the bicolor panels. And bicolor is something that I'll mention is important for the way that I do this. But basically I use one as a key. I usually try to find some sort of natural fill if there's like a window or something like that. And then I'll use the second one as sort of a rim light from the back, like a hair light or a little rim light for separation. And the key to the bicolor for those is that I'm usually walking into places that I've never seen before. It might be somebody's office, it might be a lab, who knows where it's gonna be. And what I have to do is work with sort of the existing color temperature that's happening in that room. Sometimes there are big windows that have really ugly window tint treatments over it that'll cause a really weird color temperature in the room. And so what I do is I'm able to then tune my lights to sort of get as close as I can to match that so everything doesn't look kind of funky. So that's basically what I'd say. So usually my commercial stuff is a much smaller kit, not necessarily as powerful of a kit, and I do tend to go towards bicolors for my commercial work, as opposed to you can pretty much select a universal color temperature that you want to work with when you're doing narrative stuff. Say, all right, we're going to shoot all daylights, let's get daylight fixtures up. And so you have a lot more control usually. So I hope that answers your question on that. Let's see here. Moving right along, Sonic Palette. Hey, good to see ya. Let's see here. Hey Bart, I'm looking to add a camera display for my GH5. Any new ones on the horizon that you know of? I'm aware of the small HD focus, Atomos, I can, but need more options. So yeah, monitors for the GH5, because that little flip out screen is just not big enough for me. So I do use monitors with my GH5. Usually I use my Atomos Shogun, which of course is huge, but since I'm shooting by myself, it allows me to set the monitor off to the side when I'm conducting an interview and I can kind of glance over and see. And a lot of times I will also use it to record. So I'll record ProRes so that I have much more flexibility in grading in terms of the quality of the file. But in terms of just pure monitoring, what I used this time on this trip, and it's because my Shogun is out for servicing. It had a few issues. I use it a lot, so it's just normal wear and tear. But I actually used the Aperture VS5. I love the display on that monitor. It's a big 7-inch, so I don't know if you were looking for something larger or smaller, but I like the larger displays. And it has most of the features that I want to be able to, you know, check stuff out. I can even check audio feeds in it and make sure everything's good just at a glance. One thing that it cannot do is load in LUTs. So if you're shooting vlog, you know, you can't load a LUT into it like you can with the Shogun. But the amazing thing with the GH5 is that you can load a LUT into the camera and output it over HDMI. So I'm recording log, but I'm sending a graded sort of look. It has the LUT applied out over HDMI, so I'm seeing my true colors that I'm probably going to end up with after grading. So I like that. The small HD focus, I believe, is about the same price as the VS5. I think they're within like $100 of each other. I am impressed with that in terms of its, its size. It's a 5-inch, so a lot of people have been looking for smaller monitors because these, 7-inch monitors kind of take away the benefits of having a smaller camera, but I still like 7-inch. I really do like their solution that they have for where you can also, power the camera from the monitor. With the GH5, I don't really have much of an issue with power. Their batteries are pretty good, but for the Sonys and stuff. But in terms of new stuff coming on the horizon, I don't have any inside information of anything that's coming out. So in addition to those ones that you listed there, I would look into the Aperture VS5. Because that's my secondary go-to if I'm not using the Atomos Shogun. So I hope that helps you, Sonic Palette. Let's see here. Ignacio from Madrid, which recording mode do you normally use? Vlog, Cine D. So I usually on the GH5 shoot in Vlog. because I do like to color grade at the end. I do like to have control of my colors and everything like that, so I do usually shoot in Vlog. If it's something that I'm not going to be shooting, or something that I don't want to do a lot of post work on, I actually will shoot in natural. So natural, when I'm shooting my live shows with the GH5, I'm using natural. When I shoot my YouTube videos with the GH5, I'm shooting natural. And I end up taking the saturation down just a bit because I find it's a little too poppy and vibrant and a little too colorful for me. But most of the time I am shooting in Vlog. Whoops, don't get rid of that. Let's see here. Devin, I see you popped in. Good to see you, buddy. Hope all is well with you. Hope you're enjoying that that Tri-8 that I sent your way to check out. Let's see here. Trevor says, at first I was tempted to compare the GH5 to the A7S, which means removing IBIS is odd. But I'm starting to see the GH5S as more of a baby EVA1. I think the emphasis is on color, quality, and workflow. Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's... I think what you can think of it as is the way Sony has done their A7s, where they have the A7, which is kind of just the middle of the road. Then they have the A7R, which is resolution, which is just like the insane resolution one with megapixels. And then they have the S, which is sensitivity, which is the low light beast. And so the way I see them is they're sort of a series. You know, there's a series of them. The 7 being the middle of the road, the R going towards resolution, high resolution, and the S going towards that low light and sensitivity. And so I'm not saying that there's going to be like a GH5R or another version, but I see them as two in a series. So it's, you know, GH5, GH5S, they're sisters within the same series is the way that I see them. So I haven't played with the EVA1. I think either of them would be a perfect B cam if the EVA1 is your primary. And I think it would be, you know, okay, we need to go handheld and quick, GH5 for stabilization. Oh, this is a really low light scene, S for sensitivity. So the three of them would be, you know, a trifecta, you know, of specialty tools. I know that's a lot of money to shell out just to have, you know, a full set, but I think that's the way that they're sort of shaping up and the way that I kind of look at them. So Trevor says, it seems to be really designed as a B cam to the EVA1. Yeah. And I think even the original GH5 can fill those shoes very nicely. And Panasonic is anticipating that you can supplement stabilization and want a higher level of control. Okay. Yeah. And right, by each of the Sony cameras are true hybrid cameras. I don't think the GH5S is a hybrid camera. I think it's a pure cinema camera with photos as an afterthought. I would agree on that too. I think it is. I even think that the GH5 itself, while it is a hybrid camera, I think it does start, you know, pegging the needle a little bit more towards video. And remind me, guys, I think even the model number was something that I noticed. I think the GH4 and all the other GH series cameras that came before were like DMC or something like that, and the GH5 was the first one that starts with this DC. And I don't know what that's about, where it's like digital cinema, but the way to think about it is, you know, they have the G7, they have the G9, so they have their G series cameras, but the GH series cameras always seem to be hybrid cameras, and I think that's what the H stands in there. So GH5, GH4, just my thoughts on their naming scheme. Not sure if that's true or not, but that's what I would think of as them being as hybrid cameras. But yes, I do think the GH5S is, I don't think there's going to be a lot of stills photographers picking that up. I don't think that's its strong suit. Sorry, I'm watching someone get pulled over on the exit by the popo over here. But yeah, I think it is very much a video camera. It's a very specialized, you know, tool for cinema. Yeah, so I think it would be a great B cam to the EVA1. I'm not sure if it would be a fantastic A camera for anyone. Maybe if you are constantly shooting video in low light situations, but I feel like the more well-rounded camera in terms of usage would be the just regular GH5. So yeah. yeah, that's my thoughts on it. You know, the way that I would use it, I have done this before on shoots where I don't travel as much, is I'll use my Ursa Mini as my A camera, and it lives on my tripod, and I'll shoot my interviews on that, and I'll shoot any B-roll that makes sense to get on the tripod quickly and easily with that. But when we got to move, the GH5 lives on my Zhiyun Crane gimbal, and then I just go and grab that, get some shots, you know, move really, really quickly. Don't worry about the Ursa Mini. And then I'm able to match those up in post and get some good quality there. So there we go. It's getting a little toasty in my car here, I'll tell you that. I might have to crack a window. But yeah, let's see here. Nice audio. Are you using any special accessories? No, actually, I'm not. I was a little bit concerned about how the audio was going to be on this, because usually when I stream from my phone, I have a little handheld rig. It's basically just a GorillaPod with a little phone clamp. And then I put my Rode VideoMic Pro up on top facing towards me to get clean audio, and I run that into the phone. But it's just the phone here today. The car has some decent acoustics, you know, you're not getting a whole bunch of outside noise, so that might be helping. But this is just the stock audio of the iPhone 10 that you're listening to today. So I'm glad that that actually is working out and sounding good. I'm sure if I were outside, it would be a lot worse. There's a lot of cars whizzing by, and it's a busy exit off of the highway here. So I'm sure there'd be a lot more noise. So I think being in here is helping with that. But in terms of what I'm using, nothing special, just the bare phone pretty much here. All right, let's see if we can get a few more things here. Trevor, I think you can be an A-cam if your workflow is on sticks and Steadicam based. There are some shooters that are not fans of the gimbal look or stabilized footage. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, yeah, and it's up to each individual shooter to choose the camera that's right for them. This is something that we've said forever, is that there's no perfect camera. There's no one that's going to do absolutely everything that you want. It just doesn't happen. And to emphasize the point that cameras are tools, so you select the right tool for the job. Now, I know that can be frustrating, especially, you know, when you're trying to purchase this stuff. You're like, well, I don't want to buy 4 cameras. I want to get one that, you know, I can use for the majority of my stuff. And so you're going to have to, you know, do your research and figure out which one fits most of your needs. And then you can expand if you start making money further down the road and stuff like that. But yeah, you know, I'm not saying to everybody who's going out to buy a camera, like, all right, you may have to buy 4 cameras to get everything you want. No, don't do that. That's that's a lot of money. So don't do that. Let's see here. Sonic Palette. How do you find critical focus with your GH5? I find using peaking on the GH5, some of my footage is softer than expected. So that's one thing I have not yet perfected. I don't use autofocus. I do use manual focus, but I do use, for the majority of the time, I use the Panasonic 12-35 2.8 version 2 lens. So it's a native lens that's on there, so it talks to the camera very efficiently. And usually I'm doing, I have it set up where it's manual focus, but I can tap and hold on the screen and select where I want to focus, and that gets me generally close. And then I'll check my larger reference monitor, whether it be the Shogun or the VS5. And I'll turn focus peaking on those and then make my slight manual adjustments to make sure that, you know, make sure that if I'm interviewing somebody, they're tiny on that screen. So I want to make sure that I'm focusing on their eyes and not maybe like on their shoulders. And so we'll be back focused a little bit. So I do find it helpful to have a larger reference monitor, you know, generally with its own focus peaking, to be able to tell. I don't find the focus peaking on the GH5 to be particularly good. It's such a small screen, and a lot of times it'll just, you know, light everything up because it's just, you know, it's detecting those contrast points. So it can be difficult on that. So having a monitor or a tool to do that really helps me to achieve critical focus. And sometimes even with a larger monitor, you can even eyeball it. You can look and see like, whoa, like that's not in focus, and you can make your slight shifts. It's just, you know, the size of that screen, there's only so much you can do with it. You know, it is nice and high resolution on that screen, but still just the sheer size, it's just impossible to make 100% sure that you're nailing it. So unfortunately. Let's see here. Trevor's saying, yeah, he's saying the same thing that I am. You might want to consider adding an HD monitor and EVF. It'll improve your focus accuracy. Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't think an algorithm for autofocus is going to make it better. I don't think a higher resolution tiny screen is going to make it better. I think it's one of those things where it's sheer size is what's going to make it better. It's what's going to make sure that you are nailing that critical focus. Yeah, unfortunately. But, you know, for most of the time, when I'm shooting B-roll on the gimbal, in order to make sure that I'm safe, because I can't be sitting there monitoring the focus the entire time and I don't use autofocus, I'll stop down a few stops so that my depth of field gets a little deeper and it gives me a little bit more flexibility. And then I'll set my focus on something that's, say, maybe 10 feet in front of me. And then I know that everything 10 feet in front of me as I move is what's going to be in focus. And so I'll circle people like staying 10 feet away, or as I walk down a hallway, I know that whatever is 10 feet in front of me is going to be what's in focus. And so I just sort of lock my focus, know that I have this certain range of my depth of field where everything's going to be sharp because I've stopped down a little bit, and then I can go and get my focus that way. That is a situation where I guess autofocus would be more ideal, but I'm an old school guy and I'm stubborn as hell and I don't trust autofocus, and I prefer to do it myself. It was a big thing for me to even start doing the touch screen to focus on points thing. I'm getting used to that, but yeah, I was a stubborn man about that. So let's see here. Curious, are you using something like the Atomos Inferno or just a plain monitor? So Trevor, like I was saying a little bit earlier, usually I do use my my Atomos Shogun. I love it. It's a beautiful monitor. I can load LUTs into it for viewing, and it has amazing tools, the focus peaking, the false color, all that stuff. It was out of commission, being repaired this week, so I brought my my Aperture VS5 monitor, which is my second choice behind my Atomos Shogun. It has a lot of those features in there as well. It has the false color. It allows me to monitor audio levels directly on it. It has some decent focus peaking, but it is a nice big true HD 7-inch screen. And so that is my go-to when I'm not using the Shogun. And so that's what I brought with me on this trip, and it performed fantastically. I loved it. So let's see here. 157 Pictures, I believe that's my buddy Koichi. How you doing, Koichi? And you say, I notice you're not using your 5D as much anymore. Thoughts on the 5D in general as a cinema camera and versus GH5? Personally, I think 5D looks better. So I had a car pulling up on me. It was a Crown Vic. I thought I was in trouble with the cops for a second. It's just some people parking at the hotel. So yeah, I have a 5D Mark III. It was my first DSLR. Again, I was stubborn. I refused to accept that the DSLR revolution was going to be a thing. I was like, there's no way you can shoot on a camera like that. And eventually I caved and bought one and loved it. Obviously because of the portability and all that kind of stuff. And you know, it did shoot pretty decent video. But what I find now after shooting with other cameras, you know, even the GH5, is that the 5D, it's soft. I mean, you know, it's got beautiful colors and stuff like that, but the footage is just soft. It just doesn't have the sharpness and all that. And sometimes you don't want your footage to be super sharp, but I mean, like, it's noticeable. Like if I try and cut them together, so I don't use it for video as much anymore. It does get rented out. I think it gets more use from rentals now rather than me using it myself. I haven't used the Mark IV, which is probably sharper, you know, newer sensor, and also can shoot in 4K. But I, like everybody else, was really bummed out that they put that gigantic bloated motion JPEG codec in it for 4K shooting. And I just wasn't interested. I was looking to move. And so the GH5 made the cut for me on that. But yes, I do hold on to my 5D. I can't get myself to part with it quite yet, even though I find myself shooting with it less and less. What I think I'm gonna hold on to it for is I wanna get into time lapses and motion controlled time lapses. And the 5D Mark III is still an insanely good stills camera. And so I think it may fall into a position of being my time-lapse camera. You know, you got that full frame, so you can do some low light time lapses, you know, nighttime, sunsets, sunrises kind of thing. But for me, you know, it came close to me putting it up for sale. But, you know, I haven't yet. I'm not going to make a ton of money on it because it's old, you know. So I'm just, you know, I'm going to find a new way to employ it. But in terms of the video quality, it is good until you put it up against something else like the GH5. It's like you would look at it and you'd say, yeah, this video quality is great. I don't see anything wrong with it. And then you put something else up next to it and you're like, oh, okay. Like then you can see the comparison. So yeah, it doesn't get as much use as she used to, unfortunately. But let's see here. What do we got here? Trevor says at this point the 5D is just outclassed. The 1080p from it is just not that great. Yeah, like I said, it was fantastic back in the day when there was nothing higher quality to compare it to, but now it just seems so soft and mushy to me. If I were really interested in shooting canning, I would get the C100 Mark I, which still makes lovely 1080p image. Yeah, that's true. Those C100s, you say they're still a workhorse for a lot of run and gun shooters. Yeah, the C100s, even the Mark Is, they hold up. Their sensor is, you know, it was designed for video. They're great cameras and you can pick them up pretty cheap. Especially the Mark Is. Can't you get them for like less than $3,000 now? They do have the advantages of being a dedicated video camera in terms of ergonomics, in terms of professional audio inputs and stuff like that. And yeah, also in terms of the quality of the sensor and the quality of the image. So I would not downplay them at all. I do not think that I would pick up a 5D Mark III these days. If I didn't have one and I didn't have a GH5 or anything like that, I don't think I would pick up a 5D Mark III. Just because there's so much out there that's more affordable, that it would just be, I don't know. But it's worth it for me to keep it because, you know, I'm not going to make a whole bunch of money getting rid of it. It does go out for rentals, so it is still making me some money, so that makes sense for me. And like I said, I do want to get into that time-lapse stuff, and I want to do it the correct way, which is where you're shooting stills. And I think that it would be the perfect camera to go into that position because it really is a fantastic stills camera. I mean, it is a beautiful full-frame stills camera, so... This is funny, guys. Actually, this bottle of water, you can see it's kind of ice in there. I actually had a case of bottled water in my car that all froze completely solid while I was down here in the snowstorm and everything. So they managed to thaw out a little bit over the past day or two. So now I have a case of this like really, really ice cold fresh water, which is actually kind of nice and convenient. So, and I had completely forgotten I had it in the car. It's left over from tailgating a Redskins game like months ago. So yeah, well, got enough water for my trip, so that's good. And speaking of my trip, I'm going to be getting back on the road here soon, guys, but I will field a few more minutes of questions here, but I am eager to get home. But let's see what we got here. There we go. Trevor saying 1,500 average price for a C100. Yeah, that's amazing. Let's see here. 157 pictures. Koichi, I agree. GH5 is sharper, but I think textures and colors looks better on the 5D, but point taken. There you go. Yeah, there is something to be said about that Canon color. My problem with the 5D is that I would want to mix its footage in with basically it would be a B camera for me. So I would want to mix that footage with, say, my Ursa Mini A cam on a project. And when you put them side by side, that softness and that mushiness of it just is really, really noticeable. And so therefore it doesn't work for me. You know, it was never my A camera. That's not why I bought it. But I can't throw it into the mix, shooting that video, that 1080p video on it anymore, without it being noticeable. And the only way to sort of make it not noticeable is actually to lower the quality of my A camera footage, which I don't want to do. So. And it's not knocking the 5D. I mean, think how old the 5D Mark III is, and we're sitting here knocking it, saying, oh yeah, it doesn't look as good as something that came out in 2017. Well, no kidding, you know? So I'm not knocking it. It was fantastic when it came out. It was, I mean, I jumped on it. I was like, this is amazing, 1080. The fact that I can hold something this big and take it around is crazy, and all that. I will say, picking up my 5D Mark III the other day, after using the GH5 for so much, it feels huge. Which I never thought that camera would feel gigantic, because that was like the smallest camera I had ever purchased at that point. But yeah, that's pretty funny. Let's see here. Trevor's talking about the GH5 color science and how when properly graded, it's stunning, and every bit as good as Canon. Okay, but it needs to be handheld correctly. Yeah, so you can do the work with it, but with the Canon, it was pretty much straight out of the camera. I mean, Canon's colors, it's famous for its colors, so their color science is really good. I do agree, I really like the Panasonic color science as well, and I'm able to do some really cool stuff with it. It is pretty good straight out of the camera in the natural profile that I really like. But I mean, Canon just has that Canon warmth to it, and like Koichi was saying, you know, that texture and all that, it definitely has an aesthetic that, you know, is signature Canon. Let's see here. Trevor says, sounds like it's time to get on the road. Yeah, it's getting to be about that time here. Sonic says, thank you to Trevor. Paul, how are you? Good to see you. Welcome to my live stream here, hanging out in my car in the hotel parking lot of a Days Inn somewhere in Southern Virginia. So I'm probably going to be getting back on the road home here, guys. We've been hanging out for about 36 minutes, which is probably about enough. If I wait any longer, it means I'm going to be getting into the DC area right at rush hour time, which means the last 15 minutes of my drive is actually going to take like an hour. But there we go. I just, production says, waiting to see your next week video about camera movement. Very nice. So yeah, that is a perfect segue there. So we were supposed to have it this week, you know, because of the snowstorm and my schedule getting shifted back a day. I did this impromptu, you know, Q&A live stream, but we are going to be back on track. I have rescheduled the camera movement tools video to next Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I will be back in my studio. So we're going to talk about different ways to move a camera, the tools that you would use to move a camera, you know, sliders and dollies and cranes and drones and all sorts of stuff. And then I'm going to talk about when you would use each of those and sort of what the effect is that they have, and how you would use them. So that's going to be next week at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We'll be back on schedule, so be on the lookout for that. Let me field these last few comments here, and I'll be on my way. So Paul's asking, what is your favorite camera? That is an impossible question for me to answer, because it depends on what I am doing. So I have a camera that fits almost every little niche. I have my first camera that I got was the Canon XF300. It's an ENG style camera. I still find projects where it's perfect to use that, you know, some event coverage stuff. It's fantastic. I have the Panasonic GH5, which is a small and portable 4K capable camera, which is great for the type of travel work that I just did right now. And I have an Ursa Mini 4.6K, which is great for my bigger cinema quality stuff. And so So I don't really have a favorite camera. I have a favorite camera for different situations. I have situations where the GoPro is my favorite camera because I need to stick them on cars. I did a shoot just maybe a week or two ago where we stuck a whole bunch of GoPros on a Mini Cooper, and we're shooting stuff for that. So it's possible for me to say which one is my hands down favorite camera. Let's see here. Jonas, hey, from Sweden. Don't have any question right now, but I really like your channel. A lot of nice videos. Cheers. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate you finding the channel and checking it out. And if you guys are just finding my channel for the first time, please make sure to check out all the other content I have on there. And go ahead and make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell so that you get notified every time I have either a live video or a pre-edited video going up. I have a lot of stuff coming in the pipeline, yeah, you guys can join the channel. So last things, Thomas Wilson, hey, you're popping in. I'm about to head out though, unfortunately. Got to get back on the road to get home. Man, I'm getting red in the face. The sun's cooking me in this car here. Let's see here. Trevor says my favorite camera is the Ursa Mini 4.6K, which is a landmark camera for bang for the buck, and Sony FS5. Yeah. Okay. Shiznuts, you're always late. Yes, I am on my way out, and I mean it this time. I gotta go, guys. I've got 3 hours to drive home still, and I want to beat that rush hour traffic in the DC area. And I wanted to be safe and not try and live stream while driving. So I appreciate you guys coming in and hanging out with me every Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Next week, we're doing that camera movement show. So you guys make sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you guys next week. Take care, guys. Thanks for hanging out.